He opened the envelope with hands that trembled like someone holding a confession. The photo slipped out. Daniel laughing, his ring flashing, a woman's head pressed close to his shoulder. Underneath, a hotel logo. Under that, a date stamp. Yesterday. My name is Elena Ward. I grew up believing a home is an archive of small kindnesses. Mugs drying on a rack, the slight groove in the kitchen table where our elbows always rested, the way his jacket smelled after winter days. Our house was not flashy. It was lived in, with books that never matched their shelves and a plant we both forgot to water until it gave up and looked dignified in its surrender. Daniel used to call me the lighthouse, the one that kept steady while he navigated storms. I liked the nickname because it implied constancy and warmth. I believed in us the way some people believe in the sunrise. Inevitable, steady, reassuring. But there are mornings when light reveals what darkness has kept hidden. The first small things were almost laughable. His coffee cup left in odd places, a lipstick stain on a folded shirt he swore wasn't his laugh carrying a new undertone when he scrolled through his phone. I am not a jealous person by nature. I have empathy like some people have freckles, but empathy does not mean ignorance. One Tuesday he came home with his shoes muddy though it had been dry all day. "Client visit," he said, and I nodded, letting my hands sink into dishwater to avoid the look in his eyes. At dinner, when I asked about the meeting, he put his hand on mine with a practiced tenderness and said, "Long day," the words flat, as if economy had replaced honesty. Then there were nights when his breathing changed, a jagged rhythm I did not know belonged to him. I learned to listen, the catch in his chest when he lied, the quick exhale when I'd mention plans for the weekend. Small ghosts haunted our life. They were easy to ignore until they weren't. One afternoon on our way back from the grocery, Daniel's phone buzzed at the stoplight. He snatched it like a child catching a forbidden candy. When I reached for it, he pulled away. The city noise swallowed the silence between us. I found the name at night. Serena Blake. A name that should have meant nothing. Now a drumbeat that echoed through our rooms. He called her a colleague when I asked, then laughed too quickly and said, "Don't worry, it's all professional." I wanted to believe him. I wanted the warmth of his hand and the easy cadence of our conversations back. But trust once tested phrase. The photo was meant for him, not for me. The sort of careless evidence someone sends when they forget the world could find its way into their pockets. When I found it in the drawer, my stomach turned into a knot that didn't go away for hours. The hotel's marble foyer glared in the photo, the kind of place from lifestyle magazines. Opulent, anonymous, a place for brief escapes. I remember the way he opened the door that evening. The soft click, the way rain smudged the threshold, his eyes searching my face for something I couldn't give. I held the picture between my fingers as if it might burn me. "What is this?" I asked. He looked for words like a diver searching the surface for air. "Elena, it's not what it looks like." He used every line in the "not what it looks like" script. The pause, the pleading look, the confusion, the excuse. He said she was going through a rough divorce. He said he had comforted her. He said they were friends, that it meant nothing beyond sympathy. But human bodies tell a truth words sometimes hide. His shoulders slumped. His face was a map of fatigue and fear. He had given me the same tender look he gave strangers sometimes. One built to end arguments, to disarm. I remember practically hearing the paper crinkle as our marriage shifted under my feet. The room felt smaller, like a box where the light could no longer reach the corners. Our wedding portrait watched from the mantel as if it, too, had been betrayed. "Tell me the truth," I said, and my voice sounded like someone wearing a winter coat in summer. He confessed slowly, not out of courage but because the evidence had removed escape. He admitted to dinners, messages, a brief trip where lines were crossed. He said the word mistake, as if it could be bottled and unmade. He swore to still love me somewhere between sentences. He begged forgiveness like it was currency that could buy back what he had spent. When the magnitude hit, everything went quiet. Not the soft kind of quiet of comfortable nights. The kind where you hold your breath and listen for the sound of your own blood. I asked questions, each one a flint rubbing against a slow fuse. His answers were half-steps and evasions. I think the most brutal part was that he didn't immediately leave me for her. There was no dramatic exit, only an erosion, the little ways he preferred a different presence to mine. Our house became an arena. Words, once reserved for dinners and planning vacations, became weapons. I accused, he apologized. I wanted to scream and make the world hear the injustice, but my voice was hoarse, and shouting felt like confirming a tragedy. "You didn't think of me?" I asked one night, raw and paling with fatigue. He said, "I didn't think at all," and that honesty, careless as it was, felt like salt in an open wound. I called my sister, Mara. She listened, then came over with soup, as if wounded hearts could be soothed by broth and blankets. Friends took sides silently. Some offered advice with pity, others avoided the gaze of someone whose home life had gone public to a stranger's envelope. Daniel wanted counseling. He said he wanted to save what remained. I went once, more for decorum than hope, because waving away pain does not make it disappear. The counselor, kind and methodical, asked us to articulate needs, fears, and boundaries. Daniel wept, the sort of ineffective tears of someone who had been caught rather than someone who had suffered. Meanwhile, Serena's presence evolved from a line on a page to a ghost at the edge of every conversation. I didn't stalk her. I didn't need to. People carry rumors like pollen. One person whispers, a dozen others nod, and soon her life was a parallel thread woven through ours. I learned details I hadn't wanted. Where she worked, her dog's name, the color of her coat on the day in the photo. Knowledge didn't soothe. It increased the picture into a mural. We tried rules. Daniel agreed to transparency. Passwords, calendars, structured nights. I held a list of conditions like a lifeline. But rules are scaffolding, helpful but brittle when the building itself is compromised. Then there was the legal paper I found slipped under the hallway mat, an achingly mundane thing. A notice that Daniel had been transferred to a different office, posted without explanation. He denied any premeditation, said it was work logistics. But the timing matched the affair's escalation into something that could not remain hidden. Chaos tastes like stale coffee in the morning. It felt like my life had been repurposed into a cautionary tale. Pages torn out and read aloud by sympathetic friends who preferred drama to discomfort. People came with platitudes, "You deserve better, you'll find someone else. Time heals." Those words are true in some abstract way, but when they are poured into fresh wounds, they sound like platters offered to someone starving. Practical, but not nourishment. One morning, after nights of fitful sleep and arguments replaying like bad film, I stood at the window and watched a delivery truck pass. The driver's silhouette was steady. For a pulsing moment, I envied him. A man whose life could move forward without the heavier baggage of betrayal. I had choices delineated like crossroads painted on the road before me. Stay and try to anchor forgiveness where wind had torn the sails, or leave and salvage the rest of myself. Staying would mean rebuilding trust. Not forgetting, but learning to walk with a scar. It would mean rediscovering connection amid tremors, renegotiating intimacy where doubt had been sowed. Leaving would be a clean, jagged cut. Grief for the family I had promised to hold, but also relief from the small betrayals that had become daily punctuation. I thought of our wedding vows, the words we had promised in front of guests with warm wine and knowing smiles. I thought of all the small choices that precede big decisions. The silence when he comes home, the indirect smile, the times I choose comfort over confrontation. At 3 a.m, with the house asleep like a held breath, I packed a bag. Not my belongings so much as my dignity, and the possibility of a life that was not curated by someone else's apologies. I left a note short enough to be read without reliving the whole scene, tender enough to be cruel, a recognition of love that had been overshadowed by betrayal, and a promise to myself to find truth in solitude. As I locked the door behind me, the click sounded final, the echo a punctuation I felt in my chest. The air outside was cold and honest. I did not look back. The first weeks were a ledger of small victories and humiliations. I learned to make coffee alone and to set the table for one. The silence of my apartment at night was unfamiliar and at times, brutal. It also taught me the textures of my own thoughts without someone else's voice filling the spaces. I volunteered at the community library, a place where pages turned gently and didn't ask questions. Books became companions, each chapter a small assertion that stories continue after rupture. Therapy became not a checkbox but a tool. I learned to name my feelings with clarity. Shame, not guilt. Rage, not hatred. Grief, not defeat. I practiced saying sentences out loud. I deserve honesty. I am allowed to leave. This is not my failure. One afternoon, my sister Mara and I walked to the river. We watched the current move, indifferent and steady. "You did the bravest thing," she said. It wasn't a compliment so much as a recognition, a mapping of a path I had taken. Being brave is often not an all-or-nothing deed. It's choosing a series of small acts that build up to a life worth living. I reconnected with friends I had drifted from, opened my calendar to tiny adventures, and rediscovered parts of myself I had shelved to become half of a couple. Cooking odd recipes, signing up for a weekend painting workshop, sleeping off a midnight book club discussion. These were the stitches that did not erase damage but began to mend. Daniel called sometimes. His voice on the phone was a thin thread pulling at the past. He said he was sorry, that he'd done the work, that he understood what he'd lost. I listened, aware that forgiveness is not a switch but an arc. I told him once that I forgave him, not because we would be together again, but because forgiveness was a step I needed for my own heart. It was not reconciliation. It was release. Months later, I still carried the mark of what happened. It showed up in my dreamscapes, in the quiet of anniversaries, in the way my hand hesitated before trusting a touch. But the wound ceased to define me. Money didn't change him. Temptation did. And I finally learned that loyalty is louder than family. My name is Elena Ward. I tell this story because pain hides in small things, and truth often arrives in envelopes. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself. Tell me, what would you have done? Leave your thoughts below. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe to help our channel Reddit Diaries reach our first 1,000 subscribers. Your support means everything.